Welcome to How Leaders Lead. I'm Koula here with David Novak to bring you another episode of Three More Questions. And these conversations, we dive deeper into the episode that David has just recorded. And in this episode, we're debriefing your conversation with Louise Brady. David, this was a great one.
Absolutely cool. And I think I finally met someone that's almost as positive as you, maybe even a little bit more so.
I loved listening to Louise talk. She does just ooze enthusiasm and positivity. And she's been super successful as co-founder and managing partner of Piedmont Capital Partners. And you two know each other because you both serve on the board of Comcast.
Absolutely. And she's a great director, a great business leader, and brings always a lot of wisdom and insight to anything that she participates in. But, I think what really sets her apart is that she's able to be insightful. She's able to make tough-minded comments, and she does it in a way where people want to hear because she respects everybody that she works with. And she shows that respect, and then people want to make her happy, and that's a great way to lead.
It sure is, David. Well, I'm pumped to get your take on some of the concepts that you two talked about in today's Three More Questions episode. Here we go. Question number one. I had to ask you about this, David. I love Louise's NOAH policy, NOAH. It stands for No A-Holes Allowed. Now, as you vet a leader or a company, I'm curious, David, from your perspective, are there red flags that you look for that typically indicate that someone is going to be an a-hole or just not a great person to do business with in general?
Yes. You just don't like them. I mean, they don't have any redeeming qualities that make you want to be around them. You don't want them to come into your office because you can't wait for them to get out. They're just people that you don't want to be around. I usually find these people to be Eeyores, always bringing forward the negative, cynics, and never really turning the corner on any conversation, rounding down on most. But those are some of the things I look for. But the big thing for me is that after I've worked with somebody for a while, and I don't want to see them. I don't want to go to their office. I don't want them to come to my office. I don't want to go on a trip with them. I don't want to sit next to them. That means either I'm an asshole or they're an asshole, okay? And if you're the boss, you get to make that decision. Unfortunately, in most cases, I was the boss.
It's so funny when I think about people that I've worked with in the past where at the very beginning of our relationship, I kind of had that gut intuition, like, I don't really like this person. Like, I don't really want to spend a lot of time with them. They're not positive. They don't bring anything.
You're not talking about me, are you? You said at the beginning of our relationship.
Absolutely not.
Okay, the beginning of our relationship was somebody else, okay?
Yes. Present company excluded. When I, ignore that intuition and then end up working with the person, I always freaking regret it. I always regret it because they don't change and my intuition was right. So I feel like, trusting that what you said has some truth to it and leaning into that and making decisions based on that is always going to put you in a good spot.
Assuming your intuition's good, and hopefully if you've gotten to the point where you get to make decisions on people, your intuition is good. And it's based on experience and good judgment. So, I think you're right there.
Question number two. They say in the VC world that only 1 out of 10 investments will really hit. And for many investors, they got to know when to pull the plug and just cut their losses. And while some of our listeners, David, may not be in the VC world, leaders are placing bets all the time on people, products, strategy, things like this. At what point does a leader just need to fold and cut their losses because the thing that they bet on just isn't working?
I think it always comes down to something that's very simple. Can you see your way to profitability? Can you see your way to the kind of profitability that's going to get you the right return on investment? And if you can't, you need to cut your losses. And sometimes that's because you can't get on the revenue side, what you need to have. Sometimes that's because you can't get your cost structure right. You look up and down the P&L, but if there's a fatal flaw that you can't get over that's going to never make your business model work, you need to cut your losses and move on. And that means that you can't be emotional on certain things. I remember I invested once in this company that I was very high on that could potentially change the face in the world of diabetes. You're rooting for the company, you're rooting for the person, but sooner or later, you'd be better off donating that money to diabetes than trying to, help someone solve a problem that they're never going to solve in that industry. So, you got to get the emotions aside and really look at your business model and say, does it work?
Question number 3. Louise, like you said, David, is an enthusiastic and positive leader. And in the episode, she says that when you're coaching someone on how to be more positive, you should always use stories to illustrate and make your point. Now, addressing someone who is negative can be challenging, right? Calling someone negative isn't a very constructive approach. How would you approach coaching someone who tends to be negative, guiding them towards adapting a more positive mindset?
I think the biggest thing I would do, Koula, is try to get that person to see themselves the way how they really are, the way how they're impacting people. So let's say we had a meeting, somebody's really negative, and I'd come in and I'd say, hey, and by the way, let's say we had a meeting, someone's negative, and there can be it's a coaching opportunity. I go immediately and do it. I don't wait until the review or the weekly meeting. I go right when it's fresh, if I have the time to do it, and I usually make the time to do it because it's important. I go right when it's fresh, and I talk to that person, and I say, how'd you think the meeting go? How do you think you did in that meeting? What was the reaction to what you had to say? Why do you think that was? Who did you think in the meeting really did a good job? What did they do? What kind of attitude did they convey? How does your attitude compare to that person's attitude? Just ask them a lot of questions without telling them that they're negative. Ask them questions that make them realize that maybe they could take a different approach. And then, hopefully they'll come to the realization that they could have done it differently. And you ask them, what would you do differently next time? And then, inevitably they'll say, this is what I do. They'll say, what do you think? And that's when you have the best opportunity to give them your opinions because you've listened to theirs. I've always found that once you listen to somebody else's self-assessment and help them guide them through it, they're going to be much more open to hear what you have to say because you're having a meaningful conversation with them that says you care. It says you care about how they're impacting other people. You care about their leadership style. You're trying to help them be successful. And, I think that's how you get people to potentially change their style. Now, sometimes people do have it in the wood. You can try your hardest and you just can't get it out of them. And then at that point, you have to decide whether, their skill level is worth it or if, it's not really a derailer. It's just something that they could be better at, but they're not going to get better at. But you got to realize how destructive it is in your organization because people do not like to work around negative people. And so, I at least try to get people to the point where they're at the neutral plus state, okay, versus bringing everybody down.
That is so good, David. I love the thought of asking questions that reveal to the other person what's actually happening and how they are affecting other people. Because it's not accusatory at all. It's just when people don't know that there's a problem, you kind of have to unveil what's really going on and agitate, if you will, that problem so that they actually see it clearly. And I think asking pointed questions, but in a non-accusatory way, is a very honest way to encourage that self-assessment.
I always say that the most important thing you can do is convince others to convince themselves. Telling isn't selling. It's like, that which you come up with yourself, that conclusion that you draw yourself is infinitely more powerful than if someone tells you something or tells you how to think. But if you can come to that conclusion yourself, then you own the conclusion and you're much more likely to do something about it.
I love it. That's so helpful, David. Hey, you brought your A game today on this 3 More Questions episode. Way to go.
Well, if I don't, you always give me a lot of No, I won't say it. You always give me no, that's not true. Thank you very much, Koula. I take that as a very sincere compliment.
That does it for our episode today. Thanks so much for tuning in to How Leaders Lead. We're on a mission here to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. And if you carve out a little time with us each and every week, we'll help you build the confidence you need to lead well.
And next week on How Leaders Lead is my conversation with Bobby Brown, from Bobby Brown Cosmetics to now the founder of Jones Road Beauty. And this is a woman who built $1 billion brand and is now on the way to doing another one. And she's so impressive. And I just love the clarity of how she thinks. And everybody should listen to this conversation.